Experts agree that increased tax revenue will give government more wiggle room this fiscal year to implement some of the plans without putting a strain on available resources. Priorities should be to revive the economy ravished by COVID and to reprioritize expenditure.
This is just a single fiscal year budget where we have these overshoots, but looking further into 2023-24, which is sort of the longer term path, we quickly get constrained again. It's not like we can expect huge tax windfalls to continue. So we do have to still keep a mind on the fundamentals, really, before we run out of any more wiggle room.
Executive Chief Economist at Alexander Forbes expects this budget to be better than what the medium-term budget had projected.
From a tax revenue point of view, we expect between 160 to 180 billion better than expected tax revenues relative to last year's budget, which means it's around at least 40 billion more than what was expected at the November MTBPS last year. And that is primarily because commodity prices have continued to hold well, mining sector continues to perform well, the financial service sector also continues to perform well.
The recovery document also focuses on aggressive infrastructure investment and delivery. The pandemic exposed the lack of capacity of big hospitals. Gondo says there's a need to upgrade healthcare infrastructure.
The bigger issue is that our big referral hospitals, your Baragwanath, Charlotte Maxeke, etc., are, I think they need to go through a whole process of update and reinvestment into their capacity and utilization, really, specifically for specific acute procedures that are done there. I think we saw very big shortfalls in the ability for those hospitals to deliver. So I think we need to look at the current capacity that we've got and see what's working and what needs reinvestment as a priority.
Mhlanga points out that the implementation of action items has been somewhat mixed since the State of the Nation of 2021.
There are mixed results. Out of some 26 action items, only 3 have been met on target in terms of delivery when they were expected to be. Some 5 or 6 have missed targets, 10 are still progressing, and then 8 are experiencing difficulties. So that track record says to us it's a mixed bag as far as the implementation of the reforms and the action items that come out of that are concerned. So we would not expect significant implementation in this current year. Also taking into account that it's the year when we have the ruling party has its policy conference and elective conference later on in the year. Historically, that have tended to be a no implementation year.
The Recovery and Reconstruction Strategy places jobs at its center. The Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan recognizes that to support a rapid economic rebound, there needs to be a focus on a few high-impact interventions. These include fast-tracking reform measures for a competitive and inclusive economy, as well as ramping sluggish economic growth. Gondo says fixed capital formation remains key.
The big drive here is infrastructure, or what they would call gross fixed capital formation. It's creating permanent capacity for potential growth, right? So for the future. Right now, what the pandemic did is really reduced that capacity, and so we need to rebuild and bring back that capacity. And part of that is what the president announced is going to be imminent, right? So things like spectrum for the telecoms industry, what that's doing is really allowing the telecoms industry to reinvest in the services, and that has infrastructure implications for that sector. And also it allows us to have a cheaper cost of doing business.
As far as growth expectations are concerned, we have a 2.5% growth for this current calendar year, but it moderates to just below 2% in the next 2 years. We would expect Treasury will be on the conservative side, slightly below that, which has helped them in terms of moderating the expectations as far as tax collections are concerned.
Besides challenges around how to get the economy on a growth trajectory, The minister faces a conundrum of a high debt to GDP ratio, a deficit that has been mostly funded by borrowing. But among the predictions that have been bandied about come Wednesday are corporate income tax reforms, no changes to value-added tax, and the continuation of the social relief of distress grant. Diabosito, SABC News, Johannesburg.